When I was a child, we used to love to go camping as a family. One day we were swimming in the river, and I spotted a large mass of something gooey in the water, a big glob of what looked like jelly. I had no idea what it was. I looked at it closely, poked it with a stick. Then I asked my father, who knew all things, what this might be. He smiled and said that those were frog eggs. I was fascinated, and so I asked my father if we might keep some of them. So my mother brought a styrofoam ice chest. We filled it with river water, put some of those eggs into it, and took them home so that we might witness the miracle of life. Sure enough, in time that mass of eggs hatched into many little tadpoles. Now a tadpole is a baby frog, but it looks nothing like a frog. A tadpole looks like a swimming head with a tail. All these little swimming heads were alive, swimming around, until eventually they lost their tails and gained legs. No longer did they merely swim, but they hopped. And one by one they hopped away. With tears I watched my beloved tadpoles turned frogs jump away from me. I tried desperately to cling to them, but they all slipped through my hands, frogs have a way of doing that, and jumped away as I stood there helpless. I was so sad to see them go. So many things in life are that way. A mother and a father know that same pain when their children leave the nest, or maybe not. When I was 18, I was the first to leave the nest of our home. I can remember the bitter tears of my mother. She was just as sad as I had been to see my tadpoles leave. Maybe even a little more. We try to cling, but the children lose their tails, gain their legs, and it is time for them to move on. As we go through life, one by one our friends die. One by one our friends are taken from us, beloved family members, people we were very attached to. We try so desperately and tearfully to cling to them, but we can only stand by helplessly as they jump from our hands to something beyond. They have lost their tails and gained their legs. It is time no longer merely to swim, but to jump to something further. Then comes the time of our own approaching death, and how desperately we cling to this life. But we watch helplessly as this earthly life ebbs away. For we have lost our tails, finally gained our legs, and are ready to move on. Was this not the same feeling the apostles had on that glorious day of the Ascension? They stood there and had to say goodbye to their beloved friend, their teacher, to whom they had become so attached. Already they had gone through one bitter farewell, that terrible day of Good Friday. Now that they were reunited with him, all too soon he was once again being taken away from them. We can imagine the sadness, the confusion, the terror in their hearts as they bade farewell to their beloved friend. Some years ago in Turkey, I was going through a very ancient church, admiring the beautiful old frescoes on the wall. I noticed one particular fresco, a picture that fascinated me. It was a picture of the Ascension of Jesus. There was Jesus going up to heaven, But his apostles in this picture were clinging to his hands, hoping to hold him down to earth. What a touching human element! This portrayed as no other picture I had seen the thoughts that must have been disturbing the hearts of Jesus' friends in that moment of parting. They were trying to keep him down. But then I looked more closely at the picture, more closely at the clasped hands there, and I noticed significantly that it was not the apostles that were holding on to the hands of Jesus. It was rather Jesus who was holding on to the hands of his apostles, lifting them up to go where he was going. Then I was more touched than ever by this wonderful picture. How powerful is the touch between two people. We too constantly touch one another's lives, for it is the essence of human life to touch, to connect, soul to soul. Let our touch never be to keep one another down, but rather always to raise one another up. Like the apostles, we stand always before the ascending Christ, for it is the nature of the Christ to ascend, to go up. Fearful that we be left behind, yet terrified to go onwards, go upwards, we grasp out in the attempt, the desperate attempt, to cling to something familiar, to keep the Christ from ascending, to keep the frog from jumping, to keep the child from leaving, to keep ourselves from dying or from living. Let us rather allow ourselves to be touched by God, and to be lifted up from the lowest things, lifted up from the depths into which we have sunk, from the messes we make for ourselves, to be lifted up from all that keeps us down and prevents us from rising to all we can be. Let us grasp the hand of the Christ within us, not in the vain, foolish attempt to keep the Christ down, but rather that together with him we too may ascend to the heights.